Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Let me give shouts out. First to Slipknot, Contractor, and the Geek Underground for sharing my last two uploads. Thank you from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind. Also, let me thank S. Jock because he comes through on Cash App and then he sends me news links that show me what's happening around the world. And I think it is important. I learned from him that Rodrigo Duterte, the former president of the Philippines, was arrested on a warrant and taken to the Netherlands to sit in a detention center before he goes to court for war crimes or crimes against humanity. I'm going to tell you why some of that is bogus. Apparently, this is done because Rodrigo was replaced or succeeded by the Marcos son, and the Marcos family was known, still is infamous in the Philippines for corruption and excessive materialism. Imelda Marcos, decades ago, was pretty much run out of the Philippines after a while because she was known to just spend buckets and buckets of money on things like an abnormal number of pairs of shoes instead of actually spending it where it's supposed to be spent. And as you know, when you got people struggling every day and they find out that they're struggling because you took money that was supposed to help them and you wasted it, they're going to get ticked, and they should. And I'm glad that they ran her out. She was given political asylum actually by the U.S. I think she went to Hawaii. But now her, I guess it's her son or some descendant of hers, is in charge of the Philippines. I don't know if the states has a special relationship with this particular head of state or not. I'm not really concerned with that right now. But I will tell you this: when you have somebody that is willing to look the big guys, the big white guys in the eye and say, listen, I'm not running this country for you. I'm running it for us. And if we got drug suppliers and drug addicts, I'm going to kill them unless they just surrender. Then, of course, white folk gonna get mad. I don't know if he really was just out there incentivizing his officers to just shoot drug addicts and drug suppliers without giving them trials. I'm not sure if that's what he did or not. I do know that if that is the case, then a bunch of innocent people were going to get shot to death. But many of his own people said, no, it was people involved in the drug trade. They're the ones that got taken out. And they don't surrender easily, so they had to be. Whatever the case is, Rodrigo Duterte was picked up on an ICC warrant at an airport in the Philippines. And in order for that to be the case, that means that the Philippine government had to be willing to make the arrest, and they were. And he was put on a plane and then flown to the Netherlands. And there were people that were protesting in the Netherlands saying, no, let him go. What I want to make very plain is that even the lead prosecutor said, assume that he's innocent until we can prove him guilty. And they said that they do have strong evidence. I don't think they issued the warrant with no evidence at all. But I also don't think that this has to do with um, just him incentivizing his officers to kill people involved in the drug trade or suspected of being involved in a drug trade without a proper trial. I don't think it's just that simple. What does this have to do with us? Well, we see the Philippines as a place where black men can go and not be mistreated for being black. I'm glad for that. We also know that um, within the states, we don't have a grudge with Filipinos. We know that when they've gone to the states, we don't have it out with them the way that we've had to have it out with um, the Koreans, with the Chinese eventually after the 60s. Not so much with the Japanese because we don't meet them that often. And we don't have to have, and lately, even the Vietnamese. We don't really have um, this grudge with the Filipinos that we've had with other groups. And many Southeast Asians have not been our enemies, traditionally speaking. But by the same token, we haven't always had as easy a communication with them when they first arrived in the States and we met them either. That's just the language barrier. That's not even hatred. But when it comes down to them, well, we've been able to communicate in English from the very beginning. We've been all right. I really think that one of the things that is at play, or one of the agendas that is at play, and it does not even require a conspiracy, is for the most part a lack of white supremacy. And granted, they do have some of that, some of the white worship in the form of skin bleaching and guys not trying to choose morenas to be with them, which just for brothers means, hey, that's more for us. Um, but nonetheless, we're looking at this nation that really doesn't have a habit of mistreating us. You didn't have any of them saying anything bad about anyone black until black American women started blanketly firing shots at all Southeast Asian women, period. And the Filipinas and the Thais began to fight back, and they should have. It made perfect sense. Boom Shika and Bon Quisha were ticked off that these women weren't mistreating us the way that Boom Shika and Bon Quisha were. So much so that Richie Mack is enjoying life more with a lady that used to give massages. And he said that. That's how he met her. Then, and this is a cohabitation without marriage, and she's a single mom, that he could have possibly had with a marriage to a Western Isha that had his kids. It wasn't an option. It couldn't happen that way. Not stateside. You already know what it is. And then sisters got mad at these women pretty much for not treating us badly. And until that happened, you didn't have any of them saying anything bad about any sisters. But Joan, the Pinoy Tigress, did not play around. And she started to say, look, I'm putting us first. I'm putting us number one. And she even said, without disrespecting Austin, she said, listen, Austin does not understand. Talking about Austin Holloman, she said he's visiting the provinces. He doesn't understand what you can and cannot do. People will stare because you're new. But if you say, hey, come here, can I talk to you? And they don't know you, yeah, you could get in trouble. You know what? He didn't do it. But then in some places you have this Um, you have a drug problem. And this is what also happens there. And let this be known, let this be remembered. The south of the Philippines is Muslim. That's why I tell you, if you are a passport bro and you ain't Muslim, don't go to the south looking for a wife. I mean, there are Catholics there, but don't go looking for a Muslim woman as your wife if you ain't Muslim. Don't do that. But in the south, you had a group called Abu Sayyaf. They were Muslim separatists, had been for a while. Duterte apparently began to prioritize the evils of drug suppliers and addicts over Abu Sayyaf that was not militarily active anymore against Philippine security forces, be it the police or the military. Certain rules and agreements have been put in place. Abu Sayyaf has not been firing shots. The government that does not recognize divorce, the government that does not recognize polygyny, also has allowed Mindanao, for the most part, at least Mindanao's Muslims, to marry according to Islamic rules and to divorce according to Islamic rules. The Muslims can marry polygynously and they can divorce if the marriage does not work out. Many people don't realize this. Yet the law is not necessarily written this way, but they just, Mindanao's government gets to take care of that, as opposed to the Philippines national government. That's why the Philippines have their written law, but then it's different in Mindanao. This is part of the agreement. And for the most part, for the last thing I was told, and this is by somebody that's visited multiple times, Abu Sayyaf is simply not active against the central government if the Muslims are able to obey Islamic rules in their personal lives. Duterte did not prioritize Abu Sayyaf over those who used or sold drugs. This bothered somebody, made them mad. He was putting people to death for participating in that trade. And the funny thing is, that's actually an Islamic injunction. It falls under spreading corruption in the land. If you're an addict, you're not automatically slated for death. But if you're a distributor, large quantities and the drugs are serious, you're automatically slated for death if you're convicted. Saudi will kill you. This country here will kill you if you smuggle in large quantities of drugs. It's over for you. You'll get a trial, but you're probably going to be convicted if the evidence is really against you, and then you're going to be decapitated. And here's the funny thing. They'll do an investigation. There were some Nigerian women that were freed. They were exonerated because a lot of you hear that, in Saudi, they're just looking for reasons to cut off black people's heads and stuff like that. That ain't the case. Some Nigerian women were moving over here as nurses. They got jobs here from when they showed up. Their bags had actually been stuffed full of drugs by some guys working at the airport in Kano, baggage handlers. And they contacted whoever their contacts were here in the kingdom. And they were supposed to handle the bags and remove the narcotics from their bags within the kingdom. The nurses were later on arrested. They'd gotten their bags without the narcotics, apparently. They were arrested. And they didn't understand what had happened. But they really didn't have the narcotics with them. There was just residue on their bags and in some of their luggage. So therefore, there was an investigation done. And it was determined that the ones that took the drugs, apparently those are the ones that got caught. It was determined that they did not work with these nurses whom they didn't even know to smuggle the drugs in, but that they were working with some people back in the Kano airport. That's how the drugs got into the country. The government did an investigation before the trial, and they were exonerated, never sent to trial. They were not guilty. They were allowed to stay because it was determined they had obeyed the laws. In the States, you would not have gotten off that easy, black or white. In the States, you got people that are under arrest for things that identity fraudsters did using their IDs. But the states will sit up and say, well, we're going to hold you accountable. No, you're going to pay for this. You're going to do the time for that crime. Even if somebody bought this thing that's illegal using your ID on the dark web, they did it using yours. So if you don't know who it was that used your ID, then we'll just punish you for it. Yeah, that happens. They're doing this to white folks now. So Duterte apparently took something from the Sharia, but he didn't go through the courts to do it. However, what he was going to do for a country that is largely devoid of at least any violent or aggressive forms of white supremacy, he was going to do something that could have paved the way for its future economic development. And let's not pull any punches here. We know that certain powers that be do not want economic development to occur in places like the Philippines. They ain't playing. I suspect that that's largely what it is, that more than likely his police officers did in fact take them down, and they took out people that probably weren't even armed, and that they got financial incentives for this by presenting them as armed, because corruption is an issue. I suspect that that was the case. I suspect that they really did take out people involved in drugs. I suspect that some of them decided that they were going to go ahead and point the finger at Duterte to take some and they're willing to testify to take some heat off of themselves. I suspect that the financial incentives were allowed, or that they were available, because Duterte actually incentivized this. But that was probably, at least on paper, for those who were armed at the time. And that since he didn't micromanage this once he got started, ICC found the easy inroads at the behest of whoever to go after him for this. But that their reasons for doing so are different from the local government's reasons for acting on the arrest warrant and turning him in, at the same time that some of the big criminals are just walking around scot-free. Netanyahu ain't been picked up. There's a warrant out for his arrest. He ain't been picked up. Granted, he's not going to travel to anywhere where he would be arrested. But I don't think his security detail would allow an arrest anyway. If there's a group of people that will do anything to avoid paying for the evil that they have done, they'll do any other evil, we know who that is. I've seen regular run-of-the-mill people that don't belong at all to anything affiliated with citizenship of Israel that would do just anything to avoid paying for the evil they've already done. You know, a lot of those riots that happened in South Africa, where the black South Africans were going after black non-South Africans, came about because of that. They overreacted. They admitted that. But one of the things that really kicked it off was that you had these cab pirates. And they were operating on the old taxi system. But they were sitting up and intercepting some of the frequencies that the older taxis, before the ride shares really took off, were using. You still had taxis that were there, and they were going in and they were picking up passengers by listening in on the radio frequencies of the taxi companies. So they would arrive somewhere where a customer was waiting for an actual taxi, and they pretend to be that taxi, and they pick him up. And then when they pick up, and then when the real taxes would show up, there's nobody there. And they found out who it was, and they happened to be Nigerians. And so they found out where they were based, and they went over there to confront them. And one of the Nigerians shot one of the South African taxi drivers that came to confront them. And that's when they said, okay, not only are you wrong, but now you can't even accept being corrected. We just gonna burn all of y'all, get rid of all of y'all. And they started going after Ghanaians, Mozambicans, anybody that wasn't them. Well, I really think that Netanyahu would probably be protected by men who would do the exact same thing, because that nation has shown it will disregard every particular rule of law of its own or from or international. They've already shown that they will do that. The rules are for everybody else to follow, not for them. That's how they see it. But what it has to do with us black folk is that, in a nutshell, when we're treated well, and we have to understand this, when we are largely treated well, especially if we might be treated better than you know who, than Massa and his cousins and his grandkids and all, when that might happen, usually there's going to be some kind of penalty for it. White supremacy is still international, and it is being enforced. And that's one of the ways that it gets enforced. They're not playing games. They never have. There are nations where you go and you're not going to be treated the same. There are nations where you go and you'll probably just be not treated any kind of way. That actually depends on which cities to which you go. But when you go somewhere and you find that you might actually be treated better, like in the Philippines, you might mesh better with the locals, there's going to be a price to pay. Someone's going to have to pay a price. And the nation generally has to pay a price because of its economy, or they pay through its economy. And you had a president that was going to go through there, and he was going to fix some things. And he was going to make that nation no longer an easy target, an easy victim of more powerful nations. And this is a country where we tend to get along better with the locals than the ones that used to own us. And he was going to remove one of the major hindrances to its economic development, which was the drug trade. Understand that whenever any person, whenever any group, or whenever any nation is poor, there are others that want to see it stay that way. Now, there are others who would say, well, it's better for me if the nation's doing well, because then I could expand my business into there. But then there are others that say my business is doing well because that place is poor or that group is poor. It happens like that. Oh, yeah. One thing about poverty, and some people that are rich will tell you this. One thing about poverty is that it tends to keep prices down. And that's one of the things that makes the rich as they are. It's not just how much they have, it's also how little things cost in comparison to how much they have. And this is one of the major driving forces behind people trying to make deals to keep other people poor, or to keep other nations poor. And one of the last nations that any particular currently powerful institutions want to see come out of poverty are nations where they actually are not going to mistreat us and worship Zaddy. That bothers them. Understand this too. They're going to want to do the same thing probably to Ibrahim Traore. Now, I saw an interview of Ibrahim Traore, and I think it might have been AI doctored. He was giving his answers in English, and it was him speaking English. Ibrahim Traore actually can speak English. He speaks French. He speaks English. He speaks Jula, which is also Bambara. Um, its name is Jula in Burkina Faso, but it's the Bambara language. And then he speaks Mure. These are the languages that Ibrahim Traore speaks, and his English is quite good. I mean, he could sit there and use it, but in this particular AI, um, the voice was not exactly his, but it was very close. The other thing too was that there were times when his face froze, but the mouth kept moving, and he wasn't breathing in or breathing out. And then there were words that were just missing. They're necessary, but they're missing. He would not, even if English is his second language, he would not turn around and speak it this way because his English, when he speaks it, is better than that. But I do know that they're probably, at one point, someday, the ICC is probably going to go after him too. And they're just looking to see who they can get to testify against him. But his people realize that he does not mean them any harm. His people realize that, you know what, he's got a tomato processing factory here. He's buying farming equipment. He's trying to make Burkina Faso agriculturally powerful. What blame is there for that? What's the problem? That doesn't make him enemies. Not, at least not within Burkina Faso. And France alone is just not going to be in a position without other nations' help to get the ICC to issue a warrant for his arrest. And Putin certainly has no interest in doing that. As much as Russians may not want too many Africans in Russia, the Russian government is willing to work with Africans as nations so that they could develop and they wouldn't have to go into Western Europe. But know this, though. Know this, that white supremacists want a situation in which you don't have places that you can go. That's what they're looking for. They're seeking that. They want you to not have places to which you can go comfortably. They want you to suffer that. They feel that as far as they're concerned, that's what you deserve. They want you and Black America to continue to suffer. They want Black Brazil to remain slums and favelas. They want Africa to remain a large continent of poverty, even its north. That's what they're looking for. White supremacists are looking for these things because then what it does is it always gives them leverage over you. It stifles your talent. And they conceive how much talent comes out of Africa, or the quality of the talent that comes out of Africa, even when it's stifled. It was a Sudanese boy that managed to put together a clock on his own. And because of his technical knowledge, his family was given residency in Qatar. As a matter of fact, Qatar has a very large African population living there. Doha does, and they got a lot of Black Qataris. I saw them at the border. Another place is, another example of the talent is that one man took trash and generated he built a windmill that could generate electricity. This is a long time ago he did it. I forgot his name, but I believe this was in Malawi. It was in one of the Anglophone countries. I've even forgotten the stories. There's another one. I think his name is starts with an M. I'm sorry. I forgot his name, but he came with an innovation of which I forgot. He was more recent. Uh, I think he was able to come with some sort of battery that uses the radio frequencies that are going through the air already, and it could charge itself. So it seems like it charges from the air. It's more so just the radio frequencies, but he was able to build some kind of battery that would get these radio frequencies, or it could be energized by radio waves that are going through it anyway. Imagine that. So you take a place like the Philippines, where if you do go there and you're legally there, you're good. You're not going to be treated worse than anybody else in any aspect of life that really means anything. What is that going to tell you? That's the kind of place where certain people want to make sure that the economy stays bad. And this man was going to do one thing that, while it wasn't on in and of itself going to make its economy improve over time, he was doing something that in and of itself would have made other things easier to improve the economy over time. He was about to remove a major hurdle and obstacle. It also tells you this. It tells you that the things that are done to hold other countries down usually come with a motive. There's a resource that somebody's extracting without paying full value for it. That means that there's something in the Philippines like that too. I'm not sure what resource it is, but there's some resource in the Philippines, and there's somebody extracting the resource without paying the full price for it. And then they're able to utilize the resource to make more money for themselves, and they charge the full price for whatever it is that they're doing. We just have to figure out what the hell it is. Only because that same pattern is going to play out in many places. Sometimes, even when a nation buys into white worship and embraces white supremacy wholeheartedly, like Mexico, they'll still be held back economically. How much more so when it's a nation that does not buy into white supremacy at levels of aggression and violence, going beyond a little skin bleach. So, yeah, I want to thank S. Jacques for sending me that. I mean that, man. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual, non select male power because they don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction of judgment day. Thanks for flying us with us again here at Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also heard. Keep jetting black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.